From Netflix sensation to federal prison in 18 months. From beloved family man to convicted felon overnight. From red carpet premieres to orange jumpsuits. 26 stars who threw away everything. Fame, fortune, freedom. For choices so shocking that Hollywood is still reeling. By the time we reach number 15, you'll understand the dark pattern connecting every single case. But first, let's start with the comedy star whose secret double life shocked an entire generation. Danny Masterson, the hide you never knew. Danny Masterson. Just saying his name brings back memories of laughing at Stephen Hyde's sarcastic one-liners on that 70s show. He was the cool guy, the rebel, the character everyone secretly wanted to be friends with. Then he reunited with Ashton Kutcher for The Ranch, and everything seemed perfect. Two best friends working together again, just like old times. Except behind the scenes, Danny was living a completely different life. 2017. That's when the walls came crashing down. The Los Angeles Police Department launched an investigation that would destroy everything Danny had built. 3 women came forward with allegations so serious that I can barely discuss them here. They claimed Danny had assaulted them at his home between 2001 and 2003. But here's where it gets really dark. All the victims and Danny were members of the Church of Scientology. The victims claimed the church tried to protect Danny and pressured them to stay silent. One victim said when she reported the incident at the church's Hollywood headquarters, they warned her not to use certain words and threatened her with expulsion and isolation from family and friends if she contacted police. Danny's first trial ended with a hung jury, but during the retrial, he was convicted on 2 charges and sentenced to 30 years to life. 30 years! The guy who made us laugh every Thursday night is now at a men's correctional facility in California, and he won't be eligible for parole until he's served at least 25 years. Drop a comment if that 70s show is ruined for you now, because what happened to our next star is even more shocking. Aaron Hernandez, the patriot who fell. Aaron Hernandez had everything. A $40 million contract with the New England Patriots, a Super Bowl ring. He was supposed to be the future of the franchise. Instead, he became one of the most shocking criminal cases in sports history. Aaron's childhood was marked by devastating trauma that haunted him throughout his life. According to his brother Jonathan, Aaron was physically and emotionally abused by his father Dennis, who would beat his children so severely that when Jonathan once threatened to call police, Dennis responded with threats of even worse violence. Aaron was also harmed as a young boy by an unknown perpetrator, trauma he would later disclose to his attorneys. Additionally, Hernandez struggled with his identity in an environment where his father made it clear what his definition of masculinity was and would not accept any behavior he viewed as unacceptable. The passing of his abusive father from complications during hernia surgery when Aaron was just 16 marked another devastating turning point in his already troubled life. In 2015, Hernandez was convicted of first-degree elimination in the shooting incident of Odin Lloyd, a semi-professional football player who was dating the sister of Hernandez's fiancée. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. While serving his sentence, Hernandez was acquitted in a separate double elimination case. But just days after this legal victory, he was found gone in his prison cell, having taken his own life with bedsheets. Posthumously, doctors discovered that Hernandez suffered from severe chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, a degenerative brain disease caused by repeated head trauma, which had progressed to a stage rarely seen in someone so young, potentially explaining his violent behavior and deteriorating mental state. The All-American hero's story ended as a cautionary tale about untreated trauma and brain injury, but our next star's crimes were calculated and deliberate. Harvey Weinstein, the monster behind the magic. Harvey Weinstein, the name that launched 1,000 nightmares and started the hashtag #MeToo movement. This man wasn't just powerful, he was power in Hollywood. Co-founder of Miramax, producer of Pulp Fiction, Good Will Hunting, Shakespeare in Love. He had an Oscar sitting on his shelf and the entire industry in his pocket. Before he became a Hollywood mogul, Weinstein's childhood was marked by a complex family dynamic that may have shaped his later behavior. His father, Max, was a quiet diamond cutter who struggled with failed business ventures and once betrayed his son, Bob, by spending $9,000 of his back pay, showing not 1 ounce of guilt, according to Bob's later recollections. Perhaps most tellingly, Harvey idolized his Uncle Shimmy, a hustling salesman who ripped off people and taught Harvey that honesty mattered less than success. As early as 1980, during the production of his first film, The Burning, a young production assistant named Paula Wachowiak encountered Weinstein's predatory behavior when he answered his hotel room door inappropriately, behavior that would become a devastating pattern decades later. The New York Times published an investigation that shattered Hollywood. More than a dozen women came forward to accuse Harvey of harassment and assault. A follow-up article in The New Yorker revealed even more victims, nearly 100 women, many of them celebrities, sharing their horrific experiences. The stories were all sickeningly similar. Hotel rooms, bathrobes, promises of career advancement, followed by predatory behavior. Actress Annabella Sciorra testified about how Weinstein broke into her apartment and assaulted her. Harvey was sentenced to 23 years in prison for his crimes, then faced additional charges in Los Angeles, where he got another 16 years. He's currently at Mohawk Correctional Facility in New York, and at 71 years old, he'll likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. The king of Hollywood became the symbol of its corruption, but our next star's transformation was even more shocking. Phil Spector, the Wall of Sound's final echo. Phil Spector revolutionized music with his wall of sound technique. He worked with the Beatles, the Ronettes, Leonard Cohen. He was a genius and also completely insane. Spector's troubled psychology had roots in childhood trauma. His father took his own life when Phil was just 10 years old, a devastating loss that his family never adequately explained to him. This early trauma was compounded by his older sister's mental illness, which required institutionalization, creating a family environment haunted by mental instability and unexplained tragedy. The tombstone on his father's grave bore the inscription, "To know him is to love him," which young Phil would later turn into his first hit song with the Teddy Bears at age 18, transforming his childhood grief into musical gold. Despite his massive success in his 20s and 30s, Spector's mental health deteriorated over the decades, culminating in increasingly erratic and dangerous behavior that included holding musicians at gunpoint during recording sessions and displaying symptoms of what he later described as 8 years of treatment for bipolar disorder. In 2003, actress Lana Clarkson was found shot to elimination in the foyer of Spector's mansion. After 2 trials, the first ending in a mistrial, Spector was convicted of second-degree elimination in 2009 and sentenced to 19 years to life. The case revealed a pattern of threatening women with weapons throughout his career, with multiple witnesses testifying about his volatile and dangerous behavior. He passed away in prison in January 2021 from COVID-19 complications. The genius who created the Wall of Sound spent his final years behind walls of concrete and steel. But if Spector's story is tragic, our next star's fall is purely infuriating. Suge Knight, The Death Row. CEO's final sentence. Suge Knight was hip-hop royalty, CEO of Death Row Records, the man who discovered Snoop Dogg, launched Dr. Dre's solo career, and made Tupac a superstar. Born Marion Hugh Knight in Compton, California in 1965, Knight's early life was shaped by humble beginnings. His father was a janitor, while his mother worked on an assembly line. Despite these modest circumstances, young Marion earned the nickname Sugar Bear because of his surprisingly sweet personality as a child, a stark contrast to the intimidating figure he would later become. Knight's transformation from the sweet child, nicknamed Sugar Bear, to the feared music mogul demonstrated both his athletic prowess — he was a football star at Linwood High School — and his business acumen that would eventually make him a major force in the rap industry. But Suge's empire was built on intimidation and violence. Stories of him dangling vanilla ice over a hotel balcony, of artists being too scared to leave his label, of beatings and threats became legendary. 2015, while filming Straight Outta Compton, ironically, a movie about the very artists he'd helped create, Suge was involved in a confrontation with Terry Carter and Clee Bone Sloan. In a fit of rage, Knight drove his car into Carter, ending his life and seriously injuring Sloan. Initially charged with elimination, Knight pleaded no contest to manslaughter. In 2018, he was sentenced to 28 years in prison. The man who once ruled hip-hop from a throne of fear is now just another inmate eligible for parole in 2034. Suge's downfall proves that, in the end, violence always catches up to you. But our next case is even more disturbing. Robert Blake, Beretta's real-life crime. Robert Blake's life reads like a noir film. Child star turned TV legend turned accused killer. You remember him as the tough guy detective Tony Beretta, walking around with his pet cockatoo. What you probably don't know is how his childhood shaped everything that came after. Blake's childhood was marked by horrific abuse that would traumatize him for life. He was physically and inappropriately harmed by both parents, frequently locked in closets as punishment, and forced to eat his meals off the floor like an animal. The abuse was so severe that he ran away from home at age 14, choosing life on the streets over the torment at home. His father's eventual passing by his own hand in 1956 added another layer of trauma to an already devastated psyche, leaving Blake with deep psychological scars that he would struggle with throughout his adult life. As an adult, Blake sought therapy to address his childhood traumas and often slept in his van, parked in the Hollywood Hills, seeking solace away from the world that had brought him both fame and pain. In 2001, Blake's second wife, Bonnie Lee Backley, was shot to elimination outside a restaurant in Studio City after they'd finished dinner. Blake claimed he'd left Backley in the car while he returned to retrieve a weapon he'd forgotten and found her shot when he returned. The case became a media sensation, with prosecutors alleging Blake had solicited others to harm his wife, whom he had married only after DNA tests proved he was the father of her child. After a highly publicized trial, Blake was acquitted of elimination charges in 2005, though he was later found liable in a civil trial and ordered to pay $30 million in damages. He passed away in 2023 at age 89, having lived his final years largely out of the public eye. Blake's story shows how childhood trauma can echo through decades, but our next star had every advantage and threw it all away. Joe Exotic. The Tiger King's roar silenced Joe Exotic. Even if you never watched Tiger King, you know the name. The flamboyant zoo owner with bleached blonde hair who married multiple men and owned hundreds of big cats. He was reality TV gold until reality caught up with him. However, behind the flamboyant persona and outrageous behavior lay a deeply traumatic childhood that his husband Dylan Passage revealed was filled with mental, physical abuse, and inappropriate treatment that was very heartbreaking and super traumatic. Joe Exotic wrote a memoir in prison detailing this horrific childhood that no one had previously known about, describing experiences so tragic that Passage cried and cried and cried when reading it, explaining that the book revealed a different side of Joe that helped make sense of his later behavior and choices. Born Joseph Allen Maldonado in Garden City, Kansas, Joe built the Greater Wynwood Exotic Animal Park in Oklahoma. He bred tigers, starred in his own web show, and somehow convinced multiple men to marry him. He even ran for president in 2016 and governor of Oklahoma in 2018. The audacity was breathtaking. But Joe's obsession with Carol Baskin, CEO of Big Cat Rescue, consumed him. He accused her of eliminating her husband, made threats against her, and eventually crossed a line that destroyed everything. In 2019, Joe was convicted of 17 federal counts of animal cruelty and 2 counts of attempted elimination for hire related to plots against Carol Baskin. He was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. The Tiger King is currently in custody in Texas, moved to a medical facility after COVID exposure. His wild kingdom has been reduced to a prison cell, and his roar has been silenced by concrete walls. Joe's story became a global phenomenon, but our next star's crimes were hidden for decades. Roman Polanski, the fugitive director. Roman Polanski is one of cinema's most talented and controversial figures. The director of Rosemary's Baby, Chinatown, The Pianist, an Academy Award winner whose artistic achievements are forever overshadowed by his criminal conviction and decades-long flight from justice. Polanski's childhood was marked by the ultimate horror, survival during the Holocaust. Born in Paris in 1933 to Polish parents, he was just 6 years old when his family moved back to Poland, arriving just in time for the Nazi invasion. His parents were sent to concentration camps, and young Roman survived by hiding with Catholic families and living by his wits in the Krakow ghetto. The elimination of his pregnant wife Sharon T. and 4 others by the Manson family in 1969 added another devastating layer of trauma, as Polanski lost both his wife and unborn child in one of the most notorious crimes in Hollywood history. In 1977, Polanski was charged with serious charges after allegedly harming 13-year-old Samantha Gailey at a photo shoot. After pleading guilty to unlawful relations with a minor as part of a plea bargain, Polanski fled to France before sentencing, fearing the judge might reject the plea deal. He has remained a fugitive from U.S. justice ever since, living primarily in France and Poland, countries that refuse to extradite him. Despite his fugitive status, Polanski continued to make acclaimed films, including The Pianist, for which he won the Academy Award for Best Director in 2002, though he could not attend the ceremony. His case remains one of the most polarizing in Hollywood. Talent doesn't excuse crime, and no amount of artistic achievement justifies fleeing justice. But speaking of fleeing justice, our next star tried to frame someone else entirely. Shannon Richardson, The Walking Dead's deadly male. Shannon Richardson had small roles in The Walking Dead and The Vampire Diaries. Not a household name, but she was working, building a career. Then she did something so insane, it made international headlines. Before her criminal actions, Richardson struggled to find her footing in Hollywood, taking small roles while supporting herself through various jobs. Her marriage to Nathan Richardson was reportedly troubled, and she was going through a contentious divorce at the time of her crimes, suggesting that personal desperation and a desire for attention may have driven her to commit such shocking acts. Shannon sent letters containing ricin, a lethal substance made famous by Breaking Bad, to President Barack Obama and New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Ricin. She literally tried to harm the President of the United States. But here's the truly evil part. She tried to frame her ex-husband Nathan for the crime. This woman was going through a divorce and thought, you know what? I'll send poison to the president and blame my ex. The FBI investigation exposed her involvement completely. She was sentenced to 18 years in prison for sending the dangerous letters and attempting to frame an innocent man. Shannon's desperation for attention backfired spectacularly. But our next star's attention-seeking behavior was even more destructive. Michael Jace, the SHIELD officer's real crime. Michael Jace played Officer Julian Lowe on The SHIELD. He was also in Forrest Gump and Boogie Nights. A working actor with a steady career and a beautiful family. Then jealousy and financial pressure turned him into a monster. Behind his successful acting career, Jace was struggling with severe financial difficulties that had been mounting for years. In March 2011, he filed for Chapter 13 bankruptcy, listing more than $500,000 in liabilities against only $325,000 in assets, creating enormous pressure that strained his marriage and mental health. The financial stress had become a constant source of conflict in the Jace household, with money problems repeatedly causing arguments between Michael and his wife April, an accomplished athlete who worked to support the family, while Michael's acting opportunities became increasingly scarce. On a fateful night, consumed by jealousy and fear that his wife April might leave him, Michael shot her right in front of their two young sons, aged just 5 and 8. He shot her in the leg first, uttering the chilling words, "If you like to run, run to heaven." Can you imagine? Two little boys watching their father harm their mother. The trauma those children will carry for the rest of their lives. Michael was convicted of second-degree elimination and sentenced to 40 years to life. Before sentencing, he expressed remorse, saying, "My actions that night were completely unjustified. I'm deeply sorry for the pain I have caused everyone." Sorry doesn't bring back a mother. Sorry doesn't erase what those children witnessed. Michael Jace is currently at California State Prison Corcoran, and those boys will never be the same. But if Michael's crime was motivated by jealousy, our next star's was pure calculation. Zachary Horwitz, Zach Avery, the actor who conned Hollywood. Zachary Horwitz, who went by the stage name Zach Avery, seemed like he was living the Hollywood dream. Small roles in films like The Devil Below and Curvature, but steady work. What nobody knew was that his real career was as a con artist running one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in entertainment history. Horwitz had carefully constructed an elaborate facade of success, presenting himself as a connected Hollywood insider with exclusive access to major streaming platforms. His acting background, while modest, lent credibility to his claims about industry connections, and he used his charm and apparent knowledge of the entertainment business to convince investors that he was uniquely positioned to deliver profitable returns. Zachary convinced investors that his company had exclusive deals with Netflix and HBO to purchase film rights for international distribution. He'd show them fake contracts, staged meetings, even fabricated email chains with studio executives. The FBI revealed that Horwitz's scheme had been running since 2015. Investor reports listed 52 films that were allegedly set to be distributed worldwide. But here's the kicker. None of those films existed. Not one. Horwitz defrauded more than 250 investors out of $650 million. $650 million. He used the money to Hollywood lifestyle, while investors thought they were building a film empire. In 2022, Zachary was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $230 million in restitution. The wannabe Hollywood insider is now just another federal inmate, and hundreds of dreams were destroyed by his greed. But Zachary's victims only lost money. Our next star's victims lost so much more. Darren Sharper, the safety who wasn't safe. Darren Sharper had a 14-year NFL career as a safety. Two-time All-Pro, five-time Pro Bowl selection, Super Bowl champion with the New Orleans Saints. He was supposed to protect people on the field. Instead, he became one of the most dangerous predators in sports history. What made Sharper's later crimes even more shocking was his public persona as an advocate for women's rights and domestic violence prevention, often speaking out about protecting women and appearing in public service announcements, creating a devastating contradiction between his public image and his private actions. His brother Jamie was also an NFL player, and the two had been celebrated as a football family success story, making Darren's fall from grace all the more painful for those who had looked up to him as a role model. In 2014, the truth came out. Two women came forward claiming Sharper had harmed them using substances, one incident in West Hollywood, another in Las Vegas. The pattern was always the same. He'd approach women at bars, slip something in their drinks, then assault them when they were helpless. The investigation revealed the full scope of his crimes. In 2016, Darren Sharper pleaded guilty or no contest to harming 16 women across 4 states. 16! This wasn't a mistake or a moment of poor judgment. This was a systematic pattern of predation spanning years. Sharper was sentenced to 18 years in prison. The man who was paid to be a safety became one of the most unsafe people in America. His victims' lives were shattered while he collected millions in salary and endorsements. Athletic achievement means nothing when you destroy innocent lives. Speaking of destroying lives, our next star targeted children. Jerry Harris, the cheerleader's hidden darkness. Jerry Harris was the breakout star of Netflix's Cheer series. His infectious smile, boundless energy, and genuine love for cheerleading made him America's sweetheart. He appeared on Ellen, became a social media sensation, and seemed to embody everything positive about competitive cheer. September 2020. The FBI arrested Jerry on charges that destroyed everything he'd built. He was accused of inappropriate conduct with minors, including soliciting explicit images from underage athletes. The cheerleading community was devastated. Here was someone they'd trusted, someone who'd represented their sport on the biggest platform it had ever received, and he'd been preying on young athletes the entire time. Jerry is currently serving his sentence at a federal correctional facility. The sport he claimed to love became the hunting ground for his crimes. The smile that charmed millions was hiding something monstrous. Trust is everything in athletics, especially when working with young people. Jerry shattered that trust completely. But our next star's betrayal was even more personal. Toby Willis, the patriarch's betrayal. The Willis family seemed perfect. 12 kids, all musically talented, performing gospel and contemporary music on America's Got Talent and their own TLC reality show. Toby Willis appeared to be the ideal father, strict but loving, guiding his large family to national success. Toby was portrayed as a devoted father and husband who had successfully guided his large family to national recognition, making the later revelations about his criminal behavior particularly shocking to fans who had admired the family's apparent unity and moral foundation. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation arrested Toby on charges that shattered the family's perfect image. He was accused of inappropriate behavior toward members of his own family, his own children. The investigation revealed that Toby's actions had occurred approximately 12 years earlier, when the victim was a child. This man who preached family values and Christian morality had been harming his own child for years. Toby pleaded guilty to 4 felony charges and was sentenced to 40 years in prison. 2 25-year sentences and 2 40-year sentences, all served concurrently. He was arrested in Greenville, Kentucky, after attempting to evade capture by hitchhiking. The Willis family's reality show was immediately canceled. The perfect family image was revealed as a complete lie, and the children had to live with the knowledge that their father, who they'd trusted and performed with, had betrayed them in the worst possible way. Religious hypocrisy at its most disgusting. But our next star's crimes were even more calculated. William Hayden, the gunsmith's dark secret. William Hayden starred in Sons of Guns on the Discovery Channel. The show featured his Louisiana-based Red Jacket Firearms, specializing in custom weapons. Hayden appeared as a patriotic American entrepreneur, a former Marine who'd built a successful business with his daughter, Stephanie. William was charged with serious assault charges involving 2 underage victims, a 15-year-old girl and a 37-year-old woman. The incidents occurred more than 2 decades apart, suggesting a long pattern of predatory behavior. The accusations shocked viewers who'd watched him work alongside his daughter, never suspecting what he was capable of. In 2015, a jury convicted William on all charges, resulting in a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The man who made a living with weapons used his power and authority to harm innocent people. His patriotic image was a complete facade, hiding a dangerous predator. But if William's crimes spanned decades, our next stars happened almost overnight. Ryan Grantham, from child star to family tragedy. Ryan Grantham was just another working child actor. Small roles in Diary of a Wimpy Kid, The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, an episode of Riverdale, over 30 on-screen appearances by age 21. He seemed to have a promising future ahead of him. Court documents revealed that Grantham had been struggling with his mental health for years, experiencing what prosecutors described as a downward spiral that intensified during the COVID-19 pandemic when his acting work dried up and he became increasingly isolated. Standing before the British Columbia Supreme Court, Grantham's voice broke as he expressed remorse, but the depth of his psychological deterioration had become so severe that he had planned multiple mass violence scenarios before ultimately turning himself in. Then, at 21, Ryan did something that shocked everyone who knew him. He shot his own mother in the back while she was playing piano in their British Columbia home. His own mother. The woman who'd supported his career, driven him to auditions, celebrated his successes, but that wasn't the end of his plans. After committing this horrific act, Ryan loaded his car with weapons and ammunition, intending to harm Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. When that seemed impossible, he considered carrying out an attack at his alma mater, Simon Fraser University. Fortunately, he changed his mind and turned himself in to authorities. During the trial, court-appointed psychiatrists agreed that Ryan was suffering from severe depression and other psychological issues at the time. Ryan pleaded guilty to second-degree elimination and was sentenced to life in prison. He'll be eligible for parole in 2036 after serving at least 14 years. A promising young actor destroyed his own life and his mother's because his mental health spiraled beyond control. Mental health matters, but there's no excuse for what Ryan did. However, our next star's crime was driven by something else entirely. Amy Locane, the speed that changed everything. Amy Locane was a rising star in the early 90s. She made her debut opposite Johnny Depp in John Waters' Cry Baby, earned critical acclaim in Blue Sky, and gained fame on Melrose Place. However, at what many considered the peak of her career, Locane made the difficult decision to step back from Hollywood's spotlight, to focus on raising her family, choosing motherhood over fame, a decision that would later take on tragic significance. On the very day of the fatal accident, she had started her morning by jogging with her young daughters in a double stroller through their Hopewell, New Jersey neighborhood, then drove to a nearby theater to participate in a community production, embodying the devoted mother and local community member she had chosen to become over the Hollywood starlet she once was. June 27, 2010. Amy was driving home from a community theater rehearsal when tragedy struck. She was going 53 miles per hour in a 35 miles per hour zone when she crashed into Fred Seaman's car. Fred's wife, Helen, a visiting professor at NYU, was lost in the crash. When police arrived, Amy's blood alcohol level was 3 times the legal limit. 3 times. She was charged with second-degree manslaughter and vehicular assault. Here's what makes this case particularly frustrating. Amy was initially sentenced to only 3 years in prison, far below the 5-year minimum. The judge cited family reasons and the best interests of her children. Can you imagine? Helen Seaman was gone forever, but Amy got a light sentence because she had kids. An appeals court later determined the original sentence was too lenient and increased it to 8 years. Amy is currently at Edna Mahon Correctional Facility in New Jersey and was eligible for parole in December 2024. One moment of poor judgment, driving while intoxicated, destroyed 2 families forever. Amy had chosen family over fame, only to destroy another family with her choices. But if Amy's crime was a moment of poor judgment, our next stars was pure revenge. Kaalan Walker, the rapper's revenge scheme. Kaalan Walker was a 27-year-old rapper and actor building his career through social media. He seemed like a success story, using platforms to connect with fans and build his brand. But behind the scenes, he was using that same platform for something sinister. Walker targeted aspiring models on social media, using his platform to gain their trust before committing serious crimes. One victim, Sydney Stanford, bravely spoke out about her experience. Walker allegedly acted out of revenge, with the victims having no prior connection to each other before the incidents. In Los Angeles, Walker was convicted on several felony counts involving 4 women and 3 teenagers. He was sentenced to 50 years to life in prison and will be required to register as an offender for life. Walker turned social media, a tool for connection and opportunity, into a hunting ground for innocent victims. His platform and apparent success were just bait for a predator. Social media can be dangerous when used by the wrong people. Skylar Deleon, the Power Rangers' dark turn. Skylar Deleon had a small role as an extra on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Born John Julius Jacobson Jr., he'd endured a horrific childhood that led him to change his name twice, trying to escape his past. Court documents revealed that Deleon suffered severe physical and psychological abuse at the hands of his substance-dealing father, including alleged inappropriate treatment that was never fully proven but deeply traumatized the young boy. As a baby, Deleon's father had subjected him to horrific treatment, and the abuse continued throughout his childhood, leading Deleon to change his name multiple times in desperate attempts to escape his painful past and create a new identity for himself. At 20, he was discharged from the U.S. Navy for unauthorized absences. In 2002, he married and had 2 children, but serious financial problems led him to turn to crime. Skylar's crimes escalated to shocking heights in 2004, when he and his wife committed brutal robbery and elimination. They targeted a couple selling their yacht, forced them off the boat during a test run, eliminated them, and dumped their bodies at sea. Although the bodies were never found, a confession from one of his accomplices years later led to his arrest. Skylar was eventually sentenced to capital punishment for robbery and elimination. The former Power Ranger went from fighting fictional monsters to becoming a real one. His childhood trauma doesn't excuse what he did. It explains how someone can become so broken they're capable of unthinkable evil. But speaking of unthinkable evil, our next star's scheme was both massive and personal. Joe Sun, from action hero to convicted felon. Joe Sun was a martial artist who found success in low-budget action films, alongside stars like Lorenzo Lamas and Dolph Lundgren. But his biggest claim to fame was playing Random Task in Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery, the villain who threw a shoe instead of a hat. Joe was arrested for vandalizing his roommate's car. Seemed like a minor offense, right? Wrong. When his DNA was entered into the system, it matched a cold case from nearly 2 decades earlier, Christmas Eve, 1990. Joe and an accomplice kidnapped a 19-year-old woman while she was walking her dog. They subjected her to hours of torture, assault, and threats with a weapon. During the trial, the victim recounted Joe's chilling statement, "I am my own Christmas present." Because the statute of limitations for certain charges had expired, Joe was convicted only of felony torture and sentenced to 7 years to life. But just a month after being released, Joe shocked everyone again by ending the life of a fellow inmate, leading to an additional 27-year sentence for manslaughter. Joe's son now faces the rest of his life behind bars. The martial artist who entertained audiences became a predator who destroyed lives. His brief moment of comedy in Austin Powers is now overshadowed by a lifetime of violence, from comedy to tragedy in the most horrific way possible. But our next star's story combines family dysfunction with financial fraud. Julie and Todd Chrisley. The reality TV empire's collapse. Julie and Todd Chrisley seemed to have it all. Their reality show, Chrisley Knows Best, showcased a lavish Southern lifestyle. Designer clothes, luxury cars, a mansion that looked like a hotel. Todd's tough love parenting and Julie's sweet demeanor made them reality TV gold. The couple's obsession with maintaining their wealthy image became so consuming that they resorted to elaborate fraud schemes, borrowing over $30 million while simultaneously hiding their true income from creditors and tax authorities. But behind the cameras, the Chrisleys were living a massive lie. In August 2019, they were charged with tax evasion, bank fraud, and wire fraud. The scope of their crimes was staggering. They'd hidden nearly $2 million in state taxes and concealed over $1 million in reality TV income from the IRS. Prosecutors revealed that Todd and Julie had exaggerated their wealth to banks, filed false documents, and borrowed more than $30 million to sustain their extravagant lifestyle. They were essentially running a Ponzi scheme with their own lives as collateral. After a trial that lasted nearly 3 weeks, Todd was sentenced to 12 years in prison, while Julie received 7 years. Todd is at Pensacola Federal Correctional Institution in Florida, and Julie is at Mariana Federal Correctional Institution, also in Florida. The family that made millions by showcasing their perfect life lost everything because that life was built on lies and fraud. Their children are now dealing with both parents in prison, while their empire crumbles. Reality TV often blurs the line between truth and fiction. For the Chrisleys, that blur became their downfall. But our next star's deception was even more elaborate. Jen Shah, the housewife's telemarketing nightmare. Jen Shah was reality TV royalty on The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. For 3 seasons, she dominated screens with her bold presence, fierce style, and luxury lifestyle that seemed too good to be true. Because it was. March 2021. Jen's perfect world collapsed when she was charged with criminal conspiracy to commit money laundering and wire fraud. She and her assistant had allegedly masterminded a telemarketing scam targeting elderly victims, the most vulnerable people in society. The scheme was heartbreakingly cruel. They'd call elderly people, promising website development and business coaching services that were mostly worthless. But they didn't just take the money and run. They'd keep victims on the hook for months, extracting more and more money through emotional manipulation. The victims' stories were devastating. Tricia, a 75-year-old woman from North Carolina, lost over $47,000. World War II veteran Ralph Hicks lost more than $100,000 and tragically took his own life at age 92, with his family believing the scam played a significant role in his passing. A sentencing memo revealed that Jen often mocked her victims' suffering, discussing strategies to keep them engaged and extract even more money. She showed no empathy for the elderly people whose retirement savings she was stealing. Despite initially pleading not guilty, Jen eventually pleaded guilty to wire fraud and was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. She's currently at Bryan Federal Prison in Texas, eligible for parole in August 2028. Jen's downfall proved that reality TV fame can't protect you from the consequences of preying on vulnerable people. But our next star's fall was even more public. War Machine, the fighter's final battle. War Machine, born Jonathan Paul Koppenhaver, seemed destined for MMA stardom. Over his nearly decade-long career, he fought 19 times, winning 14 with 8 knockouts. He appeared on The Ultimate Fighter and gained a dedicated following for his aggressive style. War Machine's career ended in the most horrific way possible. After breaking up with his girlfriend, adult film actress Christy Mack, he showed up unannounced at her Las Vegas home. When he found her with another friend, he flew into a rage. What happened next was so brutal, I can barely describe it. War Machine severely harmed both Christy and her friend, causing multiple broken bones, internal damage, and facial injuries that required emergency hospitalization. The attack was so vicious that Christy nearly lost her life. War Machine fled, sparking a lengthy manhunt. When he was finally captured, he faced 31 charges, including assault, kidnapping, and other serious crimes. In 2017, he was convicted of all but 2 counts of attempted elimination. War Machine was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole no earlier than 2053. The fighter who made a living with controlled violence couldn't control himself when it mattered most. Professional fighting requires discipline and restraint. War Machine had neither when he stepped outside the ring. But our next star's lack of control was even more shocking. Kris Wu. The K-pop star's fall from grace. Kris Wu was a global superstar. Born Wu Yifan, he initially gained fame as a member of the K-pop group EXO before transitioning into acting. He starred in blockbuster films including Return of Xander Cage and Valerian and The City of a Thousand Planets. Kris Wu's career imploded when he was accused of serious misconduct in July 2021. The allegations, which sparked widespread public and media attention, severely impacted his reputation and drew significant focus within the entertainment community. After a period of investigation and trial, Kris Wu was sentenced in November 2022. The case resulted in serious legal consequences, drastically affecting both his career and public image. This incident underscores the importance of addressing legal matters with care and responsibility in the entertainment industry. Wu went from global superstar to convicted felon, proving that fame provides no protection from the consequences of criminal behavior. But if Wu's fall was swift, our next star's crimes were decades in the making. Timothy Zickuhr, The Ice Road, Truckers' Violent Detour. Timothy Zickuhr was a star of History Channel's Ice Road Truckers. He built his reputation as a tough, no-nonsense driver who could handle the most dangerous roads in extreme conditions. His rugged individualist persona made him a fan favorite. The incident began when Zickuhr, after using the services of a woman known as Snow White, accused her of overdrawing his ATM card. He arranged to meet her to resolve the financial issue, but the situation quickly escalated. During the meeting, Zickuhr assaulted Snow White, locked her in a closet, and forced her to provide the phone number of someone who could pay on her behalf. This violent and coercive behavior led to his arrest and conviction. In a quick-witted move, Snow White gave Zickuhr the phone number of a Las Vegas police officer. Zickuhr, unaware of the truth, called and threatened to harm Snow White unless he received $11,000. Police quickly arranged a meeting and arrested him. During the investigation, he confessed to the crime. Zickuhr was sentenced to 5 to 15 years in prison after pleading guilty to first-degree kidnapping and extortion. The man who navigated treacherous ice roads couldn't navigate his own anger and greed. His tough guy image couldn't protect him from the consequences of violent crime. And finally, our last case proves that even childhood stardom can't prevent a complete moral collapse. Zachary Horwitz, Drew Drexel, the Ninja Warrior's hidden evil. We revisit Zachary Horwitz, also known as Drew Drexel, gained prominence through his appearance on American Ninja Warrior. His impressive physical abilities and determination made him a standout contestant in the show's 12th season, building a dedicated fan base. However, Horwitz's career and reputation were severely affected when he was accused of engaging in inappropriate conduct. The case began when he allegedly had inappropriate relations with a young fan at his gym when she was 15 while he was 26. Following an FBI investigation in 2020, Horwitz was charged with producing illegal material, soliciting a minor for inappropriate conduct, and using federal vehicles to commit these acts. Although Horwitz admitted to the inappropriate relationship, he claimed he didn't know her age. Horwitz is currently being held at the Federal Detention Center in Philadelphia. His charges carry a prison sentence of 5 to 40 years. The athlete who inspired people to push their physical limits pushed moral boundaries until he destroyed his own life and harmed an innocent young person. The pattern revealed. 26 stars, 26 complete destructions. It's not drugs, it's not money, it's not even fame. It's power. Every single one of these cases involves someone who used their celebrity status, their platform, their influence to harm others. Whether it was Weinstein using his industry power to prey on actresses, or Jerry Harris using his Netflix fame to target young athletes, they all weaponized their fame. Fame gives you access. It makes people trust you. It opens doors. And when someone with a broken moral compass gets that kind of power, they become dangerous. The saddest part, many of these crimes could have been prevented if someone, agents, managers, publicists, friends, had intervened when they saw the warning signs. But too often people look the other way when money and fame are involved. Which story shocked you the most? Drop a comment below, because I am genuinely curious if it's the same one that made me lose sleep while researching this. The next time someone tells you that celebrities deserve special treatment because they're role models, remember these 26 names. Remember that fame doesn't make you a better person. It just makes your choices more visible when you make the wrong ones. These 26 cases prove that justice doesn't care about your fame or fortune. By subscribing, you're joining a community that believes accountability matters, regardless of celebrity status. We're going to keep telling these stories, keep holding people accountable, and keep reminding the world that actions have consequences. Hit subscribe if you believe that fame should never be a shield for criminal behavior. Because if we don't keep watching, who will?